Gosh, I started having, feeling like, okay, I have a brand when I would talk with people and they recognized it or they had heard of it.
Yeah, one misconception that people have is that a profitable business still needs money to grow. Like everybody thinks like, oh, if you're making money, then you can just use that money. But if it's growing faster than what you have, you need more money to grow.
How many belts are out there in the wild?
Oh my God, millions, definitely.
Awesome. Matt, how old are you?
52.
How old do you feel?
Maybe 40.
40? How old are you?
40.
You just turned. How old do you feel? Pull that mic up. How old? How old do you feel? Like so you just
physically?
Yeah, but how? Like if you had to put your,
Or mentally?
Either or, because I think there's
they're
something
two different things.
Oh, yeah.
So mentally mid-20s, like 27. I don't know. I feel like
Maturity level of that.
yeah. I think if you asked me the same,
But physically, physically, it's starting to feel like 40, and every bit of it.
It is interesting as we get older how that you don't realize you're getting older. You still do things. You still do things thinking you're younger, when you physically can't do some things. And even when you want and mentally want to do things, it's kind of interesting. Some things takes a little longer, which leads us back into the next topic today that we're going to talk about. That we're saying number 9, right, is like being able to fund your brand and how to do that. And David certainly has gone through things in ways from very little small to like, oh my gosh, holiday season's coming up, and that entails a whole nother mindset, a whole nother level of competing in the market, having inventory and all that stuff. So David, take this bad boy away.
Yeah, absolutely. We've touched on some other episodes that, you really can't sell it if you don't have it. So, you need the inventory to be able to have those sales. So we quickly realized that last year we sold out of inventory about halfway through December, early sold out of straps. And when you have a belt business and you don't have the buckles to go with the straps, you stop selling belts.
Terrible.
So things really slowed down, and I realized, wow, we needed a lot more than we had last year. And so the entire mindset from, January 1st was, okay, how am I going to get as much money as I can to be able to have the inventory that we need for Christmas? So that was a really tough challenge. And, because we bootstrapped the business from the ground up, and a lot of, people listening are probably, doing that themselves. And if you're bootstrapping it, you're just having to slowly put the money back into the business and put it back in and buy more inventory.
You're self-financing the business, essentially.
Exactly.
Self-financing the business, and whatever money you're having there, you're having to loan it to yourself and all those good things to do it. Okay.
Exactly. So, I think, and I've heard this other places, kind of after we had been doing it, and it really clicked and said, okay, this is the way to do it. And I truly believe that, having a nice mixture of a relationship with your local bank, and if you can have that, then that's great. A lot of times they're going to want to see some proof. So they're, usually you have to be, semi-established. I mean, we were years and years in before we, even approached a bank, but once you have showing some revenue and showing some monthly revenue and growth, especially, they love to see that, but having that local relationship. And a lot of times a local bank like that is going to want to, they're going to want to loan off of what you have as collateral. So they're going to want you to either have property or, in our case, inventory. And so they're going to loan based off of the inventory that you have, which is a little bit of
causes
a
major
conundrum
problem for an
because
e-commerce.
that's why you're getting the money is for more inventory.
Yeah, and especially, again, I guess everybody's e-commerce business may be a little bit different, but in your case, it's not necessarily hold a bunch of inventory, hope to sell it. I mean, you really have streamlined the process of trying to keep that as lean as possible,
absolutely.
Which has turned into a bit of an issue when trying to get funding from a bank, because a bank's like, I'll give you money, but okay, I need a tangible asset.
Exactly, and so you're asking them for the thing that they want to use as collateral.
One misconception that people have is that a profitable business still needs money to grow.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody thinks if you're making money, then you can just use that money. But if it's growing faster than
you need, what
you have,
more,
you need more money to grow.
Yep. And so having that mixture of that local relationship, if you can have it, as well as these days there's so many lending institutions that are tailored for e-commerce. And, so that's where, there's a lot of different options out there. The one in particular that we found and that we like is Wayflyer. And they've been a great partner of ours.
Wayflyer. And why?
Which is much different than Wayfair, so a little different. But
and why Wayflyer? What are some of the things you like?
The terms were really good. I liked the flexibility of the terms, whether it's a 30, 60, 90, 120-day term. Shopify Capital is another great option, and they kind of can look at your Shopify store, see what you're doing, and kind of base the lending and the funding that they'll give you based off of your Shopify numbers. That's been both of those are great options, and we went with Wayflyer just because the terms were a little bit better. The flexibility of the terms were better. So
how in your business, and again every business changes a little bit. What have you found is kind of the sweet spot for the amount of time that you need money? As far as like between, are you holding debt for a year, months, or just depends?
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends. But I mean, for us, it was kind of a plan of slowly stacking throughout the year. So, it's really tough to all of a sudden put, millions of dollars worth of inventory on your shelves right before Christmas, for one, you don't want to risk that. What if something happens to that? So you kind of have to slowly build up your inventory throughout the year. So we slowly kind of took on that debt throughout the year, to build that up. So that, right now we have a lot of inventory, and then we have a lot more coming. So that's, having that security of, okay, we're in a pretty good spot, but we have a lot more on the way, and just have to have a bang out Christmas. So
when did you realize in your business that this was something that you had to start establishing and creating? At what point in sales were you? Because I guess people have a decision to make, right? Hey, I'm going to grow a business to this size, and I'm just going to sit here at this sweet spot. But if you want to take it to a next level, at what point, say to do $1 million, $2 million, or whatever that number is, do you really need to start considering partnerships with banks and funding some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, we were doing, maybe 4.5 to 5 million, a year, maybe the 3.5 to 4.
Self-funding?
No, so I mean, we had been self-funding up to
3 million,
up to that point. I mean,
that's impressive.
I mean, and it was hard to do, and it was a constant putting it in and placing more orders and lots of air orders.
Yeah,
which gets expensive. So that we were doing a lot of that. So getting a lot of stuff sent by air because we just had to keep putting it back in. So.
So this funny about that is, just that a little bit of that willing to take the risk on the debt was actually costing you a little bit more just because you're paying air versus like trusting the processes you've built over time and just ordering, getting the debt, bringing it in, lower price point. You're going to end up making more money off of that.
And then, awesome. But the hard thing at that time was to get, an institution to say, okay, we're going to give you, $500,000, which they wouldn't have at that time. The numbers weren't there for them to feel good enough about it. We didn't have enough inventory to have collateral.
That's crazy.
And then, when I really clicked was, like I said, last Christmas was like, okay, we've got to get we had that relationship locally, and with your traditional bank. But really last Christmas.
It's so beyond what they're capable probably of or even heard of. Like,
even
they don't even know what to I bet they don't even know what to ask for.
No, they don't really ask anything. They want to see, and it's more so on the personal level, and you have to have a personal guarantee, which is a lot different than with, a kind of tailored to e-commerce solution that, you don't have to have a personal guarantee, and it's more on, on the business and what you're doing monthly. Yeah. And so they like to see the, that monthly cash flow, revenue, and that kind of thing.
We went through a little bit of that. Our business is, we do a lot of creation and stuff, and so we've bought some buildings and things like that, and it's very fun to talk to the banks. And like you always end up having the bank manager like, hey, can we have lunch? And you're like, sure. And it's like, I don't understand, what do you do?
Yeah,
you tell them like.
People
like, where does that money come from?
Yeah,
so like they're trying to understand because it's such an old traditional way in banking of loaning money and where it comes from.
What do you sell?
What do you sell?
Well, we sell our services.
Can you hold it?
So, like you shoot with the camera, you press play and record.
A little bit. It is funny. So I think what you said is really, really awesome. Matt, do you know any other companies that use similar systems or have similar struggles? What's your take on any of this?
Yeah, no, we deal with a lot of them that get to that point of growth where they need to get funding outside or even borrow money against their inventory. There's a bunch of different solutions like David talked about. So
what have you found that maybe just some of the solutions that are people out there, maybe they're not as self-funded? When do you think someone should take on debt for things? Is that just based off the business their gut feeling on something, or is there a sales metric? Are there tracking metrics that people can look at? Is like, you know what, I should consider this at this point.
I think it matters like what your margin on your product is,
Okay.
how much inventory you have to carry, how much you have to have on the water and what's being built, because it's not a matter of like, oh, this is what's in my warehouse. It's really you're 90 days out because you have 30 days of build, 30 days of shipping, and then 30 days in your warehouse or to get everything in. So you're really looking at a much larger window.
Yeah, I mean, you're paying a deposit for an order that you won't see for another 65
months,
to 90 days. Yeah. So, it's really, and that's the tough part is to float that when you're trying to do the numbers, that we're trying to do.
And keep your
every
regular
month.
business going.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, yeah, because you're making your margin on what you're selling, but then you have to pay for 3 times more product, 3 more months worth of product ahead of time.
It's like you're camping and having to keep the campfire running all night long, man.
Right. But that's why, like, his theory of having it air freighted enough times until they knew, okay, this is,
Yep.
we're
And then we have
steady
enough time to
here,
get it
we're
sent by
good.
sea.
Because if there was ever a hiccup and he had already made that huge commitment, that's enough to make a good idea go away. Like, for sure, like we all know that just having a good idea doesn't make a good business, because there's lots of good ideas that have imploded, and a lot of times just the way the business is being managed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So congratulations on filling. Like, I'm gonna say congratulations on an amazing Christmas coming up.
Yeah, we hope so.
We hope you're gonna have inventory.
We've got all the blocks in place to make that happen. It's been a struggle to in a juggle of trying to figure that out. But we feel good about what we have on the shelves. And
so this
what we
may
will.
be the first year that we're running on all pistons, rocking and rolling, and we've only been in business for how long, David?
Going 14 years.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, this is the first time where we could go all out, and if we sold out, it would be a good problem to have.
So this year we sell out. What happens next year? Oh,
That's the good question.
We double down.
Exactly.
You double
So-
down. You're going to double
Well,
down?
and, and if we have any sort of success like we had last year, we saw how much it catapulted us into the first few months of the year. After that, so depending on what this year does, the first of 2024 could be insane, and that helps you acquire more to be able to the businesses like Wayflyer that are looking at your revenue, so they are looking at months back. Okay, well, look at December, and let's base what you're going to give us off of that. And then you'll be able to, to get through the.
What are some of the
rest of the
terms
year.
that, like, I guess, what do they charge for some of those rates, interest wise? I'm sure it depends on credit and a lot of variables, but people listening out there, what is a reasonable expectation on what using money like that costs?
Yeah, so you could have anywhere from say a 90-day term, so you would have to pay that amount back within 90 days, and then looking at it anywhere from 5 to 6%, depending on how much they're going to be pulling from your weekly sales.
Okay.
So they're going to be pulling, and that's how they're paying themselves, but that's how you're paying back that that note, and so they'll draw out that much, whether it's say 17% or 19.5%, depending on whatever it is, and so you'll have to pay a little bit more if they're drawing a little bit less. So they're going to make a little bit more. They'll make 6% instead of 5 if they're going to draw 17 instead of 19. So. But it's great because they can, they're going to draw based off of what your, weekly sales are. And then there's caps as well. So if
Nice.
you're blowing it out of the water, you're not going to have to all of a sudden pay it back in 2 weeks. You'll only pay a weekly cap for that.
Goes back to knowing your numbers.
Yeah,
It goes back to knowing, like you said, the margins, like hearing you talk like that all makes sense. So yeah, know all those things before going in debt.
So my question for you, we're building a brand. At what point did you go, okay, I have a brand? And then now what do you think is the next step to be like, oh yeah, this is our brand?
Gosh, I started having, feeling like, okay, I have a brand when I would talk with people and they recognized it or they had heard of it, or they knew somebody that had it or they owned it. We wouldn't believe how many people I talked to last weekend, went to the Appalachian ECU game and, it could have turned out better, but met so many people that had our belt or that knew about us, that knew about Anson, that were wearing one, so that's really cool to see. But so, that's kind of when it clicked, is when I would start to talk to people and they knew who we were, but when we got had our logo revision, and had our new logo, I was like, that's it. That's the one. So that was one thing that really, I felt like we had a brand.
It's awesome.
How many belts are out there in the wild?
Oh my God,
If you had to
millions. Definitely. Yeah, millions of straps. As
Yeah.
far maybe not all to unique owners, but definitely millions of straps.
Awesome.
Yeah,
David, thanks for those insights, man. This is great. Great info.
absolutely.
Thank you.